So hello everybody. Today is July 30th. It's 1:07 in the morning, and today I'm going to do a video on a book that very few people have read that relates to anime. And strange thing about this book is that I actually did a book report on it in junior high, and nobody in my class knew what I was talking about. So here we go. It's Blood the Last Vampire, Night of the Beast. Now, I know that this isn't flipped, and I probably won't have time to edit the video, so Blood the Last Vampire is, Night of the Beast, not really as tied to the movie as I'd want it to be. I realize that there are there are two, Blood the Last Vampire visual novel-esque, survival action games in Japan that really elaborate on the story to a high degree. But the problem with that story is that I'm just not a big fan of it. I think it does quite a bit that, or I'm not a big fan of it because it isn't in the West, it hasn't been released here, and it's really not fully fleshed out. Yeah, I mean, it explains the whole story, but what I'm trying to say is it could have been a better game had it just been, Sayo running around killing Chiropteran. And that's not what the game is at all. It's anime cutscenes and visual novels and reading. And you can die, and there are multiple endings, which are great, but anyway, I digress. This book review. Well, to understand this book, you have to have played, or at least seen the movie to truly appreciate the visuals here. Because one thing that the anime movie of Blood the Last Vampire constantly gets praised for is, number one, beautiful animation on the part of production IG. Just beautiful, beautiful animation, especially in an age where animation managed to look stiff. This looked very, very, very realistic. Like, movements were no longer stab. Like, that wasn't, the punches were no longer, boom. It was, it was curved. The movements were curved. Things like that. Now, why do I bring this up? Well, I actually have a problem with the movie, and that's that the focus of story at the beginning is lost by the end, where it's all about the animation. And over the course of 45 minutes, we're only given mysteries and no answers. So I had problems with the movie, but the book really does fix a lot of this, and maybe to a degree that I don't like even more. So the book is the story of Rei Miwa, and he lives in Tokyo during 1969. There's a lot of protests going on about the Vietnam War, and a lot of people are saying that, all this stuff is just immoral. But there's also this big revolution going on in Japan, and it's about, bipartisanship in the government. And I really, 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 really liked the historical accuracy that Mamoru Oshii, the writer, manages to get here, because Oshii is funny that he says anime is a medium to tell real stories. And the average, anime director, writer will say, no, anime is just, it's stories that can only be told in that format. Well, Oshii agrees with this. He says, I write stories that can only be told in the format that I chose, which is anime. He also says, however, that an anime movie needs to be, and a book needs to be just as heavy and just as well written and just as visually stunning as a real movie. It needs to be just as smart and complex as a good live action film. So an Oshii film needs to be able to, be comparable. Now, it's not, but needs to be on the level of, like, 2001: A Space Odyssey or Clockwork Orange. In the same style that Kubrick's films were very visual. His stuff has to be very visual while still being thought-provoking. So, it's very much like that. Now, one thing I didn't like about this book was that So the main character is Ray Miwa, and he's a college student, or is he? I know he's like a high school to college. Okay, I got it. He's a high school student. Um, he's a high school student, but he's part of this revolution. He lives with his parents and so on and so forth. And one night, while there's this is a big Oshi thing, is that while he's at this rally, a riot breaks out, and he runs, and he ends up in this alleyway hiding, and sees this girl, this high school girl with a samurai sword, and she kills this bat-looking full-on creature. Now, the funny thing about this scene is it's complicated. Like I said, it was a bat creature. The book obviously explains this, but it also explains that Ray only saw it as this human being. He says it's like half human being, half chiropteran, which are what these creatures are called. So, in the book, he sees this murder, is essentially how he sees it. He sees this murder, and then he sees two American FBI agents in suits take, this high school girl away willingly. She willingly goes with them, and they congratulate her, and she cleans off her sword, and the scene ends. And so, in that part of the book. And so, Ray's questioned by the police the next day. It's not human blood, so they can't do a DNA trace, and they realize that, okay, maybe he doesn't have anything to do with the riots around, and maybe he's just like some kid who has to do with these riots, so he's not a murderer, so the cops let him go. Now, this sounds like stuff that's going to lead into a big, heavy, action book about this girl who runs around with a samurai sword going and cutting down monsters, and he's gonna go on an adventure with this girl. Not at all. The entire book is basically this guy meeting with his friends and a reporter, and just talking. They talk at a restaurant. They talk in a mysterious unknown base for the American officers. They talk at a high school. They talk in an abandoned warehouse. They talk in his room. This entire book is talking, and it is a very heavy book. So they deal with issues like religion. They talk about the validity of evolution. They talk about the political atmosphere of the the late 60s, early 70s in Japan and in America. They talk about the horrors of war. They talk about human psychology. Actually, I mentioned 2001: A Space Odyssey earlier. It's in the, they talk about it in this book. And to put all this onto there, it still manages to be as mysterious as the movie, and that it does, while there's literally pages upon pages of just characters explaining things to other characters, this book never reveals the big mystery of who exactly Saya Otanashi is. And that's the high school girl. And so the audience, the reader has to sort of figure these things out for themselves, piece it together. And of course, this is where the other two books in Japan and the games would have come in. So, while I did really, really like this book, I can't give it a high score because it has too many problems that I feel are really there. They're these. I'm stuttering. Sorry, it's late. There are these problems that just are inexcusable. So, for one, I said that there's no action in this book. Well, the problem is that there is action. There's just no fear when the action happens. Or I should say that the book does a good job at making you think that a character can die at any moment, without really making that fear, submit. When action scenes are done in minutes, when the suspenseful scenes are done in seconds, oh yeah, it's hard to care that someone might die. So it's good that you get explanations here, and that you get some really high quality philosophical and, questions raised. It's not exactly the type of book that is just... Now, I'd also like to mention that the translation I'm looking through it right now. It's actually really good. You know, I mean, the pages have quite a few words on them, not too many, but you know, enough, and it manages to convey quite a few story elements, you know, and get quite a bit jammed in there for a book that's only about 300 pages long. I know that's actually quite a few pages, but it is a book that manages to make all this work, so that's fine. What else? Well, is it a good horror story? No. So actually, I'd like to go back to something earlier before I finish, you know, this review and give my score. But I was talking about reading, you know, giving a book report on this in junior high. And Daniel, if we ever get him on the show, will attest to this, that when I told about this book, nobody in class understood what I was talking about. They literally looked at me blankly and said, what was that you just talked? So the Catholic Church is evil. There's a Jewish group called the Rothschilds. There are vampires, a samurai sword, a high school girl, the Japanese government in the 1960s. How am I supposed to understand this? I guess you're not supposed to understand this. I mean, to be 100% honest with you, this book was not written for Americans. It's written for, you know, the Japanese and an already pre-established Japanese environment. So if you're otaku, weeaboo-ish, I don't like either of those things, but if you're both of those things, this book may not appeal to you. Because this isn't Japan is great in every single way. This is Japan kind of sucks. Here's what we need to do to change that, while at the same time being anime stereotypes need to be broken in one story. And this is actually the epitome of what you know, my blog is about, really, because you have this Japanese high school girl with a sword, and you have this completely, you know, serious story that doesn't go out of its way to be like, she's a high school girl in a dress. How kawaii! That's kawaii! And wait, she's gonna say, June. No, look, those things suck in anime. And this book and you know, the Blood of the Last Vampire series really does a good job of breaking down, you know, these tropes that have to exist in anime for so many people. I'd also like to say that they made Saya, especially on the cover, look evil. She has bags under her eyes, her lips stick out quite a bit. She doesn't look like this really cute girl, but she still has a sense of sexiness. So they did a really good job with that. I have to praise the art director here. I don't know who it is, but I can probably check. Katsuya Tarada did the design for the cover of this book. So, yeah, interesting stuff. In conclusion, I would pick this book up if I was looking for something very philosophical, very much based in this kind of strange pseudoscience. So, very good science fiction here. If you like vampire stories, I might pick this up, but this is not fantasy vampire. This is, you know, evolutionary vampire, and not to the point where they're just like with fangs. They're actually monsters. If you like government, don't pick this up, because it's probably going to completely say something that's just not true. Though it's kind of a propaganda-ish book. That's a good thing, believe it or not, in this circumstance. You know, in what I'm saying now, because it very much portrays a very strong idea, very Ayn Randish, and that it feels the need to put these things in your head, but while still telling a good story. If you're looking for action, if you're looking for, you know, violence, okay, violence maybe, but if you're looking for action and lots of just like edge of your seat suspense, you're not going to get that here. I'm sorry. It's a good book. I hope everyone will read it, but if you don't like anime, I don't think I can suggest this to you either. And if you really don't like being confused, or like if you hate endings that really leave things ambiguous, I wouldn't read this. So, I'm going to give this book a 3 out of 5. Even though I really liked it, I'm going to come at this from an objective manner. I am going to give it a 3 out of 5 and about a 6 out of 10. It's about it's about middle ground. It's not breaking new ground. Oshi's written a good story here, but on its own, it doesn't do anything particularly special. Now, if you couple this with the movie, I'd give it about a 4, but once again, I'm reading this book, on its own merits. So, about a 3 out of 5. It's interesting to read if you're really looking for something smart, but don't want to go pick up a philosophy textbook. So, with that, pick it up sometime. I also realized that this video has been very grainy. I had to set this up as quickly as possible, so I'm sorry. And also, I'll have you know that very soon I will be starting a new Let's Play. I've already finished working on later episodes for Steppenwolf. Right now I'm editing them. But this week, I'm going to be releasing a video for Streets of Rage, maybe. So, I'll either be doing Streets of Rage or some Zone of the Ender stuff. We'll see. So, with that being said, I'll see you around, guys. Future Let's Plays, future podcasts. If you want to catch us, we're at kyosho1902.tumblr.com. That's the blog. You're on the YouTube page. So, subscribe, and we'll, hope to see you soon, or in later videos, or in games. Just trying to run up time at this point. Okay, peace.